All right. Hello, everyone. We are here for a new segment, which I thought would only be right to introduce with my friend Dis or Dis. How are you, Dis?
Great, man. How are you?
Awesome. I'm feeling good about myself. As you see, I've gotten my expensive clothes, and the world is mine. Um, this topic was a common conversation, but actually the suggestion for the movie came from this, and I really appreciated it because when I came to this country in 2003, before I cracked open a book at the university, before I took any courses, my education started with this movie because everyone around me would ask me, "Have you watched Scarface? You have not watched Scarface? How come you haven't watched Scarface?" And people were so outraged and so incensed by the fact that I hadn't watched this movie. I didn't even know much about it except knowing that Al Pacino was cast in the title character. Um, so I felt like I was lacking something quite fundamental, and it took me only one try to understand how crucial it was to my American education. And I think this is not a coincidence, right? Of course, Oliver Stone is the one who wrote the script, which was in turn a rewriting and a remake of the 1932 uh, movie Scarface, and of course the earlier novel by Armitage Trail, who lived a pretty short and tragic life, that needs to be said. But he basically wrote a character called Antonio Camonte or Tony Camonte, who was loosely based on the real life gangster Al Capone. So there is, if you watch the earlier movie, there is a very incredibly captivating but also gratuitously violent story of living the American dream and becoming, as the story progresses, this kind of character who starts really owning that place, really owning that role uh, excessively, and that ultimately leads in both the original movie and the remake in a demise. And we can, we will mostly talk about Scarface 1982. The last thing I will say by way of introduction is when you look at Oliver Stone's character, of course, there are so many movies, I don't need to recite them all, that are explicitly political and are made on political figures, born on the July 4th, the Nixon movie, the JFK movie, W. Um, but even when Oliver Stone writes or makes a movie, um, when it's not explicitly political, let's say, for example, Natural Born Killers or Midnight Express, there is certainly a very strong undercurrent and even forceful political messaging. So I would start by saying I think Scarface is a very political movie, especially in the 1983 version.
Hmm. Okay.
What do you think, this?
Well, actually, I never thought about it as a political movie, but of course, I think Plato. I don't know who. Someone said everything is political. Anything outside of the polis is a barbarian. So I guess it is political if you think about Castro. Throwing out the undesirables to America. So there's lots of politics here, yeah. Also communism involved in the, in the scene where they with Rebenga in the, yeah, the
That's amazing.
camp, and he
Do you
says,
remember the line?
of course. Wait, I don't remember exactly. It's something like I kill. No, he said he just watched it, so
I'll kill a communist for fun. You know, or first tell your friend it would be my pleasure. I'll kill a communist for fun. For money, I'll carve him up real good.
yeah, exactly. So there is politics. Yes, there is politics, and maybe you can say also there is a drug lord politics when you see
Of
the.
course, the territorial fighting, which
Mhm,
of course, resonates within um, an understanding and also criticism of that criminal scene, but also as a kind of microcosm for the larger society. And I mean, again, in when I say political, I mean it exactly in the way you just described. Not in the sense that it is like a propaganda movie or something. But if you remember the beginning of the movie, which has this very wonderful technique of splicing what is actually newsreel / documentary type of footage that
mhm,
channels you into this very realistic world. And after the story runs, and after they have that snippet of Castro's speech about the undesirables, that the people who haven't internalized the revolution by now, and that's like, 59 is the Cuban Revolution, 61 is Bay of Pigs, um, 62 is the missile crisis, and this movie is set in 1980, when Castro basically opens the Mariel Port Mariel, and sends away both people who have already relatives and ostensibly also kind of the criminal underbelly of
mhm,
Cubans who are directly released from jail. But long story short, I digress a lot, so you'll have to shut me up sometimes. This, even though I play the host here, the very first time someone that you would identify with utters something, it's this father who is trying to console his son, saying, Mira, 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 showing the American flag. So
mhm. All right.
that's the kind of politics I mean. These are
Yeah.
people who leave everything they have back. They are distraught, they are sad, they are lost, but they are
Mhm.
coming into this new place with immense hope and with real aspirations, with dreams larger than life.
that's a that's a good point. I like it. You're very observant. I mean, this is like a really small part in the beginning, and I like that you mentioned it. Um, well, yes, it's a movie about the American dream, obviously, and what you can do with it, how you can twist it to make it the world yours, so to say. But the thing is, when he's twisting too much,
Hmm.
and I think this is what we're talking about. It's also about the human psyche. It's so much things, that so much themes. Yeah,
Yeah,
hey Mookie.
and I mean, in the right after, of course, he has that scene where he's being interrogated. Clearly, Tony Montana doesn't receive the warmest of welcomes when he arrives, and they send him to this place that is unironically, I think, called the Freedom Town. And it's literally people living in a tent city under a butterfly junction of a highway. um,
Mhm,
and they are pretty desperate and cramped. And
mhm,
in fact, that horizon that opened at the beginning of the movie with the home of the free and land of the brave seems to have closed down completely the minute they arrived. And I know you have a pretty good memory of what happens because you just brought it up. They they are given this assignment, right, for the hope of getting green cards.
Yeah, they're given this assignment to whack some guy named Rebenga.
Yeah,
Who was
Emilio Rebenga. Yeah,
Emilio Rebenga was some kind of official in the back in the old country in Cuba, and for that they get it was to get a green card, like you said, um, and we have the assassination scene. Um, yeah, no, really don't have much to say about it. I mean, it shows you what kind of person Tony is. He's not afraid of violence. He's not afraid to kill someone in order to, advance his targets. So I think that's what it does.
and the thing is, again, he's gonna flip very soon. But yes, there's some sort of joy for him, right? In committing something like that. Next time he sees, the new bosses who opened him this channel and gave him a green card, he he's much hungrier and very angry and has very specific demands. It's already not enough for him because he has seen, he came to pursue his dreams and he's just washing dishes, right? He can't content
Yeah.
himself with that. But in that moment, like you said, that with everyone chanting and this theatrical staging of the whole scene, with him just almost coming out of nowhere and, like you said, knifing the guy, whacking the guy, with a very intimate personal message, kind of shows you again how far he's willing to go already in the beginning for something as little as getting out of that hellhole.
Mhm. Yeah. So, yes, and we see really, I think, much of the movie is about how far he's going to go, but there's a big but here.
Huh?
It's also about where he won't go. Ultimately, that's what brings his demise.
That's true. That's true. We will get there, but he does have, and I think that's why the movie was ultimately very influential. He is a true anti-hero. In a sense, he's a villain. He is, as he says, he's the bad guy that other people want to point to and ultimately feel good about themselves because he's so out there. He is so extravagant and so flashy about it. He doesn't hide anything. He doesn't lie, right? I don't hide, I don't lie. um Alejandro Sosa style and accent. Hey, man, I don't try to make an accent, but it is what it is. I did say to this right before we started, that guy is my favorite character. And again, it's a love and hate kind of relationship I have with him. But coming back to Tony Montana, he's a villain, clearly, but he has that human side to him because he has certain values. He does actually have a lot of love for his family, for families, for children, especially. And like you said, we're going to get to that specific scene where, like you said, that brings uh, his demise, which of course is already an extension of events that triggered him. But let's focus, by the way, on that. What should we call it? Don't bring a chainsaw to a machine gun fight scene. Their first serious assignment, that allows them to quit their day jobs and start playing big. Um, let's see. I have some, nothing too special. This is the IMDb page, so let me see while you talk about it if I can find some stills from that.
Okay. So the scene is Tony and his friend Manny, and what's the guy's name? Chichi, I think. And
Chichi.
they go to some house on the Miami beach, and they want to make some kind of drug deal. Um, it's an iconic scene, about there we see Manny. Yeah. So Tony enters the flat, and there's an interesting exchange, and then there's a very, very I don't know how to say it,
Hector.
interesting, yeah, show of violence. Yeah, it involves a chainsaw. There's Hector, um, and I think for 1983, what happens in that scene is quite violent, like excessively,
Oh man.
because how many
So the
chainsaws do you see?
the thing is, the earlier movie was censored and banned so heavily that the maker of the movie shelved it for a long time. Um, and it was only after his death that the estate sold the rights, which led us to this movie. But it was so excessively violent that people criticized it for glorifying crime, suggesting at the very least an incestuous relationship between the brother and the sister, who incidentally, by the way, the original Tony Montana, or rather Tony Camonte, is played by one Paul Mooney, who uh, actually earned his chops in Yiddish theater,
Mhm.
which is very fascinating. Of course, he himself having had an American dream as a career, being having been born in Lemberg, and having made it in um, in the movie industry at those early times.
Mhm.
But yeah, this scene, I mean, it's also, I think, okay, maybe I'm reading too much. You can correct me here, but
Okay.
I also see in it already a hint um, about the fact that we are in the movie, because everything is too real at this point. That's that they have this awkward greeting and a conversation that leads nowhere. So Tony says, uh, I go out and we do this again. you know it's kind of like, wait a second, are they rehearsing a movie or something? um
Yeah.
but I think there's a sensitivity to the fact that they shit's gonna hit the fan, as we can put it in the best Americanism possible. And people who have prepared this scene, writer, director, and everything, they are very well aware. um
Mhm.
and there's a lot of blood, a lot of gore. No, Paul Mooney, this spelled this way. And if you look him up on Wikipedia, you'll very quickly understand why he had to take on a stage name, because he has a very long, very German and very Jewish name. And I, the great actor that he was, I don't think he could have made it at the time with his full name. So,
Mhm.
uh, and the great comedian Paul Mooney was not yet alive, I don't think, in 1930s.
Mhm.
Going back, literally executes the guy at the end in the street. Like whatever
Wow.
happens in the room, he literally ends up killing him. There's kind of an ethnic strife behind them as well, right?
Mhm.
Hector is trying to make or nationalist, kind of chauvinistic kind of antagonism. He asks him where he's from, and Tony says, where the fuck does it matter where I'm from, man? He gets very angry at that question. And he was already saying to Manny that, he doesn't like Colombians, right? This is what he said at the beginning. Um, so there is actually a lot of complexity, and I'm perhaps more sensitive to this because the original story is much more explicit about how Tony, in trying to take over Chicago, gets into a territorial conflict with the Irish.
Mm.
Um, so maybe having watched both of them again in close succession alerted me to these strifes a little better. Um, but anyway, I mean the violence was outrageous for the 30s. It was still pretty bad in the 80s. Um, and already there, I think, like Manny kind of going after his desire and the lust he has for a woman, to the neglect sometimes of what, keeping his eyes on the ball, so to speak.
Mhm.
If he were 2-3 minutes earlier, maybe something else could have happened, for better or worse. But
Mhm.
anyway, that's what happens. They lose a friend, but they make others in the process, and they make their way into uh, Frank Lopez's good graces.
Mhm.
What do you think about Frank, who welcomes them in his home?
Um, First, I really like the actor Robert Loggia, who's a great
Mm.
actor. Frank is a well. I mean, you can't ignore the high that he has on the chest. The
I
big
can't.
high. Yeah. So,
I can't.
so I like him. Um, I think that he's a very not from my experience of being a gangster, but he's not that. He's quite soft. Okay, you see, like
Yeah.
what happens, what transpires, shows you that he's not. He's very business minded, but he gets how do you say Tony. I don't want to say manipulates him, but he does something to he essentially takes over his business, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but I do think that it could have worked out differently because Tony didn't intend to, end up with what happened to him, killing him and taking over the business. But it is what it is for the story. He has a beautiful wife, um,
Played
Elvira.
by none other than Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yes. When Tony comes to his house and sees her, it's like love from first sight. Based on just looks. Yeah.
Oh, it's Tony would tell you it was love at first sight on both ends. The eyes, Chico, they never lie.
Yeah, that's when they dance in the Babylon Club. She calls him a monkey. It's very apparent that she likes him too. You know, yeah. So Frank, yeah, that's Frank. Like Ozzy's friend says, is a businessman. Yeah, he's not there to take unlimited risks. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Um,
and in a way though, I think again the movie ingratiates us to Tony and his perspective as well, because you said, of course, Tony, in a way, being so hungry for power and so hungry for that sort of territorial expansion and his own masculinity, that's already taken into the conversation, right? You have said Frank is soft. Tony already has eyes on his woman, so there's already the game starts there to one up him. But the story also gives us some of Frank's motives, and when he talks with Omar Suarez, what do you think of him? Omar Suarez says he's a peasant. and insults him, and they never get along anyways. But then he says, "Hey, you get someone like on your side, he breaks his back for you." So on on his side, he's trying to exploit Tony as well in his own way. He's a businessman, but that doesn't mean he's somehow so much more ethical than Tony, who doesn't have maybe that kind of restraint.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point actually. I remember that scene in the Babylon when he's dancing with Elvira and he says that. Uh, yeah, Tony is like he's not mad, but yeah, he's like he will do anything for you, which it says shows to us that the Suarez does think that Tony is loyal. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think too that Tony is loyal. So that's an important point. Omar Suarez, what do you think about him?
That's also a great actor, by the way, Murray Abram, who was most recently in what is it, White Lotus season 2, the series that was really popular. It kind of, I'm not gonna spoil it or rehearse it too much, but it's kind of like a whodunit kind of murder mystery that takes place in a resort town each season, a different resort town, and with little carryover in terms of the cast. Um, uh, the I wanted to say one more thing before we go to Omar Suarez. He later on, I think Tony says this to Alex Sosa. He says, I've never fucked anybody in my life who didn't have it coming for him, right? So
Hmm.
again, he has a multi-layered, rather complex set of motives, which makes him again a likable or at least a rational villain, right? He will
Yeah.
eliminate you if you wrong him. If you cross him, he will come after you too, but he doesn't just break his balls or word, as he says, for no reason whatsoever. He doesn't fuck with people just because.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bizo. Um, when it comes to Omar Suarez, I think we you don't quite know, right, whether he's actually a police informant or not, because Sosa is just so clean cut, so surgical, has such a poker face. You will never know what he's really after, right?
Hmm.
He's in this estate slash plantation like structure in Bolivia, but his territories are set to extend the entire range of Andes. He has this impeccable wardrobe and the most toffee British accent imaginable in the middle of the jungle. He and I was mentioning this, he himself looks very white. Everyone who takes care of him in that mansion has distinctly indigenous features. So there's something about him you don't quite figure out until the very end, in fact. And even then, you don't really know. I mean, you can kind of get an idea what this guy is up to, but you don't know what happens to him. You don't know whether he orchestrated the hit. I mean, it's easy to guess, but you know, it's not plugged into the plot. Um,
Hmm.
but yes, so you don't know whether Omar actually is a police informant, whether he is actually a mole, or Sosa kills him to both get into good graces and also paint Tony into a corner where he would have to agree to a deal with him because he has so much product to move and he needs a partner in the US.
Hmm.
Um, so it's interesting how he finds himself in that position again because he doesn't know what he's dealing with, right? he's not a natural himself, much like Frank,
Mhm.
of whom he's an associate. He he has certain desires. He wants to make business, but he doesn't know that he's sitting at the same table with wolves, who have much less of a calculus than him. They want it all and more and more. This guy is just trying to make a deal, $10 million here, one there, two there. He's not looking so much further ahead, and that gets him killed.
Mhm. Yeah. I think Sosa is maybe one my favorite character as well. He's he's a man of mystery. He has this British accent, as you said. He dresses like the Sister Sledge song. He's the greatest dancer. He dresses like with blah blah blah. You know he's got the rees. He's really impressive. But he's he's a businessman like Frank. He's more successful than him. He's more ruthless than him. And again, I think about the end, saying that if you think about it, like without emotions and morals and values, it, Tony ended up fucking him. So
Yeah.
he's not in the wrong. He was okay. He kept his part of the bargain. You know. So I like to keep that in mind. And
You like him that much, huh?
I made an impression of him on shorts. It's like him that much. Yeah. Don't fuck me, Tony. You ever try to fuck?
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, he's a businessman, but certainly a shark compared to the small fish that Frank Lopez is. I mean, you remember when they bring Tony over after he facing these charges, and he has his country's Minister of Interior. He has a friend from Washington D.C. He has, like, Chief of General Staff. I don't remember the exact cast of
Yeah.
characters, but you know,
Yeah.
very ominous clan there.
And I must say, that scene. It's like how it was shot. When they see the guy on this TV, the journalist, and you zoom on their faces and you see the hate. It's so well done.
Yeah, and it's in a way, it's also like the way Tony was raging at the TV when he's sitting, in his tub in Miami, and he says all these things about politicians and journalists, and
Yeah.
again about how they are running their own racket. It's just legal, and his isn't. That
Yeah.
for him that's the only difference, right? It's not a moral distinction. It's not a qualitative distinction necessarily. It's just
Mhm.
about some legality, and he doesn't
Mhm.
care about that anyways. He's someone who has always teetered at that thin line that separates legal from illegal.
And he complains about the mobsters, the mafia, which is interesting because it makes the distinction between Tony is not Tony Sosa, Lord Frank. They're not mafia people. They're, I don't know how, cartel. I don't know how you want to call them, but it's interesting, to make. It's not a mafia movie. It's a gangster. He's a gangster, but he's not a Al Capone in the sense that he's in a family and the commission and this and that.
Yeah, they are. Like you said, there's a sense that a lot of these characters are above it, that uh, they have already devised much more complex business like structures, shell corporations, going back um, to some of the pictures, all these companies that he founds with beautiful buildings,
Mhm.
already.
Yeah,
Even Tony, the realty company, and this financial company, political campaigning, and whatever else. He's like you said, these are people with business interests, international connections. Yes, they're engaged in illegal activity. They're trafficking drugs, but they have already put a different kind of garb on. Yet they also exist in this liminal space between illegality and legality, right? They are not as legal as the politicians and the straight cut people, clean cut people. They're also not as illegal, perhaps, like you said, like the mafia of the early 20th century or the interwar years, where it was very local, and much more territorial in that sense.
Hmm.
That's a very good observation.
Hmm. Um, Ozzy says we're going like in a chronically we're going like from the beginning to the end of the movie, but Ozzy says Tony has no limits, which is interesting
Yeah.
when you think about pushing to the limit. And I like what he says because um, indeed, like the song is push it to the limit, but there's a limit to the limit, and that's where Tony, he didn't see the sign. He passed the limits. So that's interesting. I like that comment.
That's yeah. I'm sure Ozzy also has that in his mind in a way, because right when he takes over the empire,
Mhm.
um, he gets as he had the sequence, right? In this country, you have to get the money, and then you get the power, and then you get the woman, and that prophecy, kind of plays out in this montage sequence where they are, just stacking up and counting their money, and just running through the town, getting married with the boss's wife, um, Elvira, and getting the tigress and the tiger, because he does call her also like a tiger, right? So gets both Elvira and a real life tiger.
Mhm.
So everything seems to be coming to him, and everything seems to be working out for him,
Mhm.
and he starts pushing it to the limit, because it wasn't enough. You remember that scene when, after killing Frank, he comes to take Elvie, wakes her up, and when he's waiting for her to get ready, he looks out and sees the famous tagline on the Zeppelin, "The world is yours."
Mhm. Yeah.
So he hears the prophecy and follows it.
Can we just, we cannot transform it in words, but the cinematography, how they shot it, it's a very, it's like the evening and it's very bluish, and you see him. It's just shot very, very good. We can't, show. Maybe we can show it, but just to say something about how they shot it, which was,
Mm.
you know, huge part of the filmmaking process. So, yeah. What's the next?
Kind of, I think we can get a glimpse of it, get a
Yeah,
sense of it.
exactly, exactly. I think it's like a painting. It's so
The
American.
original was pretty good too, by the way. I've not read the book, but I have watched the original movie. This is the Camontes' apartment in Chicago, and he looks onto this billboard, which has this slogan, and it's like Cook's Thomas Cook and Son, the
Mhm.
travel company, kind of offering that promise: the world is yours. um,
Mhm.
and it's kind of a one sentence summary of that invitation into the American dream.
Mhm.
um, on the one hand, there is this great promise of self-making, You can become anyone and anything you want as long as you want it and work hard for it. Um, and there's almost no end to what you can uh, do when you get into that mode. But of course, the world doesn't belong to anyone, to any one of us, and certainly never to one person. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, this guy also he is coming from the gutter, right? You know, so
Yeah,
he has seen much worse. But once he starts winning, it's hard to get off the table.
yeah, yeah. It's like he wants maybe, and tell me what you think. Like he wants power. I mean, we have the three. You see the three, uh, the Holy Trinity. We have power,
Mhm.
money, and women. Okay. So women, I don't think is that. I mean, he has Elvira. He doesn't need anything else. But he wants unlimited money and unlimited power. I think that's his downfall in a sense.
Yeah, it's not enough. Again, he gets the woman he desires, um, but I think that's in part the reason too. They can't have children. They're both, you know, she is in a way always a passerby, anyways, right? You know, she's very aloof still in her marriage to Tony Montana as well, constantly snorting coke. Already part of that montage, you know, that's how it ends, right? You know, with her um, doing lines.
Mm-hmm.
And in an interesting way, right? You can say maybe from an exaggerated perspective, you can say, oh, you know, that there's all this misogynistic piling on that character and whatever. But the story seems to tell us, you know, she's the one who gets away, right? She's the one who is not punished by everything. You know, with
Yeah,
all these more modern, more contemporary movies, it's usually the most beautiful woman who dies
mm-hmm.
first, right? Um,
Yeah,
in this movie, the only person we actually get to know who gets to live is Elvira. Everyone else is fucked and is dead at the end.
that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good
I mean,
point.
even Sosa and his allies, right? Because now the UN knows what they're up to. Now the entire global community might be coming after them, not only the Bolivian government.
Mm-hmm.
So even they are not quite safe and settled as they once were. Uh,
Yeah,
Tony's gang is completely done. Elvira is the only person who ends up saving herself. But yeah, the for Tony, that relationship is not enough.
mm-hmm.
Just controlling Miami is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
just having that lucrative operation and giving the bank a cut is not enough. So he has to go to someone who does things a little different, and he gets caught then and there. And that's the second moment, by the way.
mm-hmm.
And I want to say just one thing about that, where you get this meta perspective once again when one of the guys is talking to Chichi, I think, and says, I was in this movie Burn. Do you know it? I was Marlon Brando's driver, and
Mm-hmm.
Burn is a movie made by the Italian Jewish director Gillo Pontecorvo, who uh, more famously made Battle of Algiers, and who has this sort of um, post-colonialist cast to his cinema. But most importantly, he was along with Costa Gavras the most important political director of his time. Um, and that movie was about this imaginary fictional Caribbean island that is trying to break away from Portugal, and Marlon Brando's character, who is for the most part called Ingles, is sent there to liberate them, and kind of things unfold. But anyway, a lot of the techniques that um, Gillo Pontecorvo uses in his movies are influenced by that kind of splicing I talked about at the beginning of the movie, uh, that mixes newsreel with cinema. Because apparently, when he was young, a lot of times he would go to cinema to watch these newsreels, and he wanted to replicate in his movies the kind of granular reality that that kind of reportage conveyed. And um, he was very influential in making that into a legitimate technique. And clearly, Oliver Stone, and in this case Brian De Palma, took from him. And what do you think about that whole debacle, and how Tony starts slipping basically after that moment?
Tony, after the when Elvira lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, when he starts basically, getting in trouble with law, and he's about to go to prison, so he goes to Sosa to basically save him, and gets involved in this international conspiracy.
um, well, again, 1 hour 30 is so little to discuss this movie, but I think we need to mention the Tony's obsession with his sister Gina,
Of course.
his overprotectiveness of her. When it comes to relationships with men, and of course her relationship with Manny, his best friend. And again, you watched it just now. I didn't watch it for a while, so I don't remember when Tony kills Manny. I think it's before the end, like a few scenes before
Yeah.
the big shoot off. But I think that's one of his biggest mistakes, and you actually see it in on himself when he returns to the mansion after he kills Manny. He says something like Manolo, Manolo.
Yeah.
and then his end comes. So, but anyway, I'm fast forwarding. So, the deal with Sosa is, government friends. Um, it's it's I mean it's out of character for Tony, I think, because what they're actually asking him to do is to kill an innocent man. And if I think maybe I'm missing something, but I'm not sure that Tony kills any innocents during the movie. He does get when they try who was it? It was Frank's assassins tried to kill him in the Babylon Club. They killed that guy who was singing Frank Sinatra in the costume. So that's an innocent, it's a casualty, but it's not because of Tony. But it doesn't really lead to innocents being killed. And why does he accept this mission? Shows that maybe he was in a very dire situation. And we can go to what happens, in New York, and talk about that too. That's very interesting. It has some redeeming qualities for Tony.
Yeah, and again, I think the reason he finds himself in such a dire situation, I think it's something very specific and something very broad and thematic about the movie. Again, right? Because he says, "Not possible. I don't want to reach a deal. I'm not going to prison, even if it's for a couple of years, 2 years, down the road. I'm not going to go back to prison. I'm not going to go back to that hellhole," right? So And what is prison? Prison is the absolute negation of freedom, right?
Mhm.
He has come here for freedom. Uh, he was shot into he was sent into the so-called freedom town, which was again the opposite, which was like a prison,
Mhm.
guarded like a prison. Um, and he doesn't want to go back there. He doesn't want to go back to Cuba in the same way he doesn't want to go back to prison. And he's willing to do anything, just about anything for that, but not anything. So we come to this particular scene, right? He
Mhm.
has once again accepted um, to commit a political assassination, or at least help aid and abet in doing that.
Mhm.
However, like you said, the character this time is much less implicated in violence himself. He's just trying to expose, in fact, the criminality of others, the drug trafficking. Um, but even if he is okay with that, he gets completely enraged when he realizes that this guy is actually still going to ignite that fuse and blow up the car that contains not only their primary target, but his wife and two daughters.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so on this photo we see Alberto. That's
Hmm.
Sosa's man, and not a man of many words, but a ruthless killer, um, portrayed by the excellent Mark Margolis, who played in many movies. We know him as Antonio Napa from Oz, if anyone knows that show, and of course Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, Salamanca, Hector Salamanca, and many other roles. He's a great actor. He doesn't show it. I mean, he's great here in this movie as well, but he doesn't talk a lot. So it's who we have in the car: Hector, Alberto, Chichi, Ernie. Ernie was
Yeah.
Frank's bodyguard.
Hmm.
When he asked him, "You want a job? You want a new job?" and Tony. So again,
Speaking
everybody
of
knows.
which, yeah, again, he even in that scene, right? He gets Manny to execute Frank. He kills the fake policeman himself, and then he offers Ernie a job, right? Because
Yes.
he knows that guy is just an associate. He doesn't know any
Yeah.
better, so he doesn't kill him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, he could have just killed him. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about it. So yeah, as we know, you said the car contains kids, and he says, "You think I kill a woman and two kids?" You know, I can't. I don't have the accent, but I think. And then he kills, of course, he kills Alberto, which, as we said, leads to his demise. But he does the right thing, and I mean, maybe he doesn't think of it at the moment, but like he was willing to endanger his entire, empire
Yep.
for not killing innocent kids. Like especially at the end, it's a kids. Maybe I'm going too far, but maybe he has some soft spot for kids, for the the
Of course. Yeah.
innocence of kids, and
You remember when he I mean, that I think that's beautiful, actually, because it connects just about everything. You opened a great path here, because this is when he, beyond the flirting aspect, when he comes poolside to really woo Elvira. Do you like kids? I like kids too. So
mhm,
I want you to be the mother of my children.
mhm,
His overprotectiveness of his sister, which Manny says it's whatever he does for your good, because you are pure for him. Everything around him is contaminated with something. You
mhm,
represent for him something untouched, and he wants you to keep out of it. And he is not, he ends up basically killing the husband of her sister because they marry in secret, right? Manny and Gina. And he ends up getting his own sister killed as well because he he ends up pulling her inside the same dirt, which is something that he dreaded from the beginning. So at the end of the day, like you said, it's too much. It's too much for him. He doesn't want to kill other kids, which he considers pure, of course, and they should be left untouched by this conflict, whatever it leads to.
Yeah, that's a great point. In a sense, he treats Gina like a kid. He has some soft spot for this innocence, that he's lost so long ago.
That's right. I mean, which by the way, I mean, he has a very, very strange relationship to the rest of his family. Of course, he would be willing to say just about anything when he's getting interrogated, but he says his father is dead. Turns out that he may not be. He just ran away from the family and left them alone. He had said his mom is dead. She's actually in the US already, in Florida. So he has a very complicated relationship with his parents and with just about anyone else from his family, except for his kid sister, baby sister, as this is constantly mentioned in the movie, right? So you're absolutely right. It's she is that figure for him who needs to be protected and preserved from this corruption of the rest of the world. And it spills over to everything else because he does actually hold that as a principle. It's not just a screen for him. And of course, you can also say because of the way he acts, whether he's drugged or not, on the phone with Sosa, right? He says, you want war? I'm going to give you war. So it's maybe he does once again doesn't even realize that he has crossed the limit, right? Maybe he thinks he can still go on.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite scenes, actually. The heated phone call with when he returns, and Sosa tells him, "I told you a long time ago, you little fucking monkey, not to fuck me." Who the fuck you think you're talking to? I'm your bellboy.
And the funny thing is, again, Sosa, even that conversation, he starts absolutely smooth and suave. He's like, so what happened, Tony? I mean, I don't have the entire lines, but it was like, so what happened? What did you guys do in New York? And like this kind of absolutely villainous, non-emotive, almost sociopathic tone, but even he loses it at the end, and Tony loses it even more.
Yeah, I think Tony says to him, "What is your problem, Roberto?" So I had to cancel his fucking contract, something like that. Hello, Curly.
Yeah. Best line in the movie: "I tell the truth even when I lie. Say goodnight to the bad guy." And that's that is something I think we can end on. We have a little more time, so we can get to that scene, which, even if it doesn't occur at the end, I think has something profound to say about one of the strong messages of the movie. We have been already touching on it, but we can continue dancing around it a little longer. One thing, of course, that is prophetic in the movie, a line that Frank says very early on to Tony. By the way, Curly, nice to see you. Good to see you in the chat.
Great to see you.
Rule number 1: don't underestimate the greed of the other man. Right? So, which comes back to haunt him, because he does underestimate the greed of the other man, i.e. Tony Montana. Tony, in a way, also underestimates, because he thinks it's enough for him to just say to Manny, "Hey, that's my sister, back off."
Mhm.
Whereas, if Tony is led by his unbridled, unrestrained desire for more money, more power, Manny from the beginning has this soft spot for woman and his lust for just sex, period.
Mhm. Mhm.
Big Meat 199. Fight me dead. I need to peel myself off this floor. Well, you should have had a little less to drink, my friend. See, we are
Mhm.
just drinking coffee, this and I,
Yeah, yeah.
enjoying our morning.
But before we end, I want to touch on the end because I, maybe it's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
We have a little more time.
okay, so first time I must say something about the soundtrack of this movie, the
Yeah,
original soundtrack. Of course, we have the most of the songs, if not all, were composed and made by Giorgio Moroder, as one of my musical heroes. And I think it's a perfect soundtrack. Really captures the early '80s, the excess of cocaine and power in Miami and all this. And when we come to the end, um, there's this very upbeat, like I think Latino style drums beating when the Colombians are crossing crossing like the walls
perimeter
into
into the
mansion.
mansion. Yeah,
and and it's funny now that because as you said in the beginning, Tony doesn't like Colombians, and in the end, the Colombians sent by the Bolivian take him out. It's interesting, but you know, when we reach the end, when has his shoot off with everyone, and he's all coked up, he takes their bullets, and you think you're gonna take me? You need a fucking army, you're gonna take me, you fucking with the best. What ends up killing him is uh, someone shooting him in the back with a fucking shotgun, huh?
yeah, and that's
Uh,
that's like a that's like a reincarnation of Alberto, right? He kind of looks like him as well, like, same stoic posture, no words, no screams, nothing.
yeah, he doesn't say a word. This character doesn't say a fucking word. But it's and it's interesting. What it says. What are the meaning of him getting shot in the back? He's not man enough to kill him from the front. Um,
Hmm.
because he can't. Maybe it's just something that I thought about. And he falls into the pool with the word is yours, the globe, and more there's ominous music begins playing. I
Yeah,
think it's a very, very. Um, I mean, you're sad when I mean, I was sad when. Yeah,
of course.
exactly. This. I
The
mean,
the thing about this scene is, again, we talked about the cinematography of the movie, and how some of these scenes, at least, if not all, are staged. And this was an incredible scene. I mean, uh, it's the iconography of a martyr, right? He literally gets killed with in this posture.
yeah,
He's falling like
right.
that. As you see, he falls
Fine.
like that into the pool. So he falls. That whole scene is, and I hope no one gets offended by this. I don't get, again, we're just talking about symbols, and we're not making light of anyone's beliefs, but there's a certain sense that he's depicted as if we are going through these stations of Via Dolorosa. It's like, the Passion of Christ. I mean, he ends the movie like a martyr, but also with this, like you said, this very wonderfully, um, this ominous message, where
Mm.
the world is yours was, the manifestation of his wildest American dreams at the beginning, where he started pushing to the limits. When he exceeded the excess, right? Remember Elvira's words, nothing exceeds like excess, which in the beginning doesn't make sense because, again, we treat her kind of, as a junkie, and, how can wise words come out of her mouth? But it ends up uh, with this scene where Tony exceeds excess and the world is yours actually becomes the message that greets him and greets you as the viewer when he is dead. Maldives says an interesting word about that the symbol of the Freedom Town built under crossroads, and Tony Montana chose the path he knows is the easy path. That's a very
Wow,
good reading as well.
yeah, great point. Um, we haven't said anything. I mean, again, there's so much to say about this movie, but "Say Hello to My Little Friend." It became such a iconic, saying that's it's so many things. Okay, again,
I think no, we can say something about that. We have at least 10-15 more minutes. Here is what I will say about this, just about the influence, about the real influence of this movie. Um, those lines, those zingers, those one-liners have made into so many rap verses to begin with. There is a very good rapper, if I might add, with the name Scarface, of course. Um, but there's also the fact, for example, Freeway Ricky, the real Rick Ross, who operated an empire based on cocaine and crack out of Southern California. He says he was himself inspired by this movie, and there are so many stories among real dope boys of among rappers and among others who, after seeing the movie, literally drove down to Miami from the Bronx to try to make their first dope deal.
oh
And
man,
Ricky says something very interesting uh, about his own involvement in the drug trafficking, um, that kind of fulfills the prophecy of this movie as well. He says, you once you start winning and making this kinds of money, there's no stopping you. You end up wanting more, and the only way that it ends is either you get killed or you get thrown in the can, right? Either you get caught or you get killed. There's no other way to end it. And Freeway Ricky didn't only get caught once but twice, and only after the second time he came out, he reformed himself in a different way. So there's real world influence and percussions and resonances of this.
that's what he said about Ken or death. Was also said by another Tony, Tony Soprano, one scene
Right.
where he's talking to Melfi, his psychologist, psychiatrist. So just I don't know where he brought it from. Maybe he brought it from there, but anyway, it's true. In this line of work, you don't have a lot of exits. You don't get to retire. It's rare to get to retire, peacefully in a mansion in Bolivia. You know?
Right. And again, I do want to emphasize, we don't know what happens to Sosa, right? We really
Yeah.
don't. Not that, again, anything too ominous is implied, but certainly he is himself painted into a corner. He is himself not in a sticky spot. But nevertheless, Tony, the lesson that this scene teaches us, like you said, with this very mournful and threatening at the same time score that accompanies it, um, is very striking, and is perhaps also um, a kind of an antidote to all the gratuitous violence and, we can say, this glorification of a certain kind of lifestyle that the entire movie serves us. At the end, um, all of them lose their life and lose everything they have. And there's something like that. There's a lesson in that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So maybe to wrap up the discussion, let's talk about that bad guy scene, because I think that can help us bring together a lot of the scenes in the a lot of the themes in the movie, I meant to say. um what did you think about that movie? Of course, I'm going to try to bring up a picture and maybe think a little bit about also what he says there.
You, you mean the restaurant scene?
Yes.
Well, I think well, see, you think about the scene, you imagine him with the the tux. He wears a tux, I think, right? He's wearing the tuxedo.
Yeah, they're in
He's
the restaurant. Manny is there too, and he's fighting with Elvira.
I think he's wearing the tuxedo, and is has his tantrum, and I think it's easy to see how out of place he is in this restaurant. Because in the end, and it might be a little bit. I mean, maybe you might not agree with it, but he's a hoodlum. See, he's a hoodlum who made his way to riches and power, but at the end of the day, he's still in the gathering in Cuba. Like that's how. I mean, it's not that simple, but I mean, you don't. He's out of place, is what I'm saying, and
Mhm.
but he does spit the truth on the people there on the restaurant, because they are so different from him. He wants to be accepted among them, but they reject him because he's an immigrant, he's a criminal, he's a uh, and that a bad guy he says something about about you need bad guys like me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting if if every society needs a bad guy, to accentuate the good guy. I don't know. Let me know what you think.
I think that I will kind of tie this scene to, again, when he was raging in his bathtub on the TV on these politicians and journalists who he thinks are just playing the same game, but on a different level or with different rules, simply, that don't apply to him, which has been an advantage until he got to a certain place. And now he feels it's holding him back. He wants to be, like you said, he came from the gutter. He is a criminal, uh, but he wants to be accepted by the society. He wants to be able to live as he lives without being judged, ostracized, excluded. And like you said, he finds himself here, uh, and he sticks out like a sore thumb, even though he is well dressed. He's dressed in a way that's even too much for that scene. Um, and one thing he says in that bathtub scene is very fatalistic, right? And kind of spells his end too, because he only trusts himself. Who do I trust? Me. And sure enough, yes, he has a lot of people around him who betray him, who fall short of his expectations. When he goes to New York, Manny, instead of taking care of business and being in charge of everything, runs out and gets married with his sister without telling him anything, because they want to surprise him, etc. So there's a lot of funny business going on around him, but nothing can justify that sort of attitude. But in a way, he finds himself in this fatalistic trap when he is cast into a role that he is unfortunately too willing to take on, like he does at the end of this scene, right? I have taken some notes here, so I don't have to recite from memory. He says, "Say goodnight to the bad guy. The last you have, you are going to see, the last time you are going to see a bad guy like this again," right? So in the sense that he he is almost this larger than life character of a villain. And it sounds comical at that point, because we came to love this guy in a certain way. We came to identify with him. We came to sympathize with him, even though he is clearly an villain, but he's more like an anti-hero because he has such identifiable and likable traits.
Mhm.
And he finally says, "You just know how to lie and to hide. I always tell the truth, even when I lie." So, like you said, on the one hand, it speaks to the fact that society, maybe that's too specific of a word, because I think it's more fatalistic than that. He's cast into this role that he can't escape, so it's almost that he's destined to destroy himself, to self-destruct,
Mhm.
because society needs these sorts of bad guys who take the spotlight, who take the attention, who draw the society's ire, and all the uh, persecutions and hate and admonishment, so that others who know how to be more careful about their business, who know how to hide things, and perhaps that's why you need someone like Sosa, who seems to be kind of in that role when he can actually be sitting on this table and look like everyone else, at least on the surface of it. Tony
Mhm.
can't. He just can't escape this role of the villain. He doesn't know how to lie. He doesn't know how to step outside of that role. And that's perhaps why he can't suck it up. Um, and that gets him to where he has, because he gets to trample upon Omar Suarez and Frank Lopez. But once he crosses the limits, and says, "No, I won't kill. I won't do this. I won't kill innocents. I won't kill a family and his daughters, young daughters, children." Everything comes crashing down, and it's not like he didn't deserve it, right? He had it coming for him too, just like he said about others. He only fucks
Yeah.
people who has it coming
Coming to-
for them.
Yeah. He stays true to his word.
That's amazing. And to a certain extent to his balls as well, which is the only two things he has, as he
I think
so
it's right.
poetically puts it.
Uh,
So any last words? This, I think we had a wonderful discussion, and I'm very happy having you here on this channel, especially for this.
happy to be here. Um, well, again, there's so much to say about this movie. We haven't said maybe 10% of what we have to say, but I think it's interesting to examine its significance in American culture and in film. Worldwide. I mean, how it affected people, like you said, rap music. There's also one uh, two rappers called Tony Touch. They have a song named the Diaz Brothers, which very good song, very popular.
There is
Uh,
French Montana.
French Montana, yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't hear of
Uh,
that.
there's
Uh,
Scarface. Yeah, there's so many lines. I mean, Freddie Gibbs has "All I Have is my word and my balls" in one of his verses, for example. Which, again, one of the fascinating things about cocaine rap or gangster rap is precisely this. idea of referring to the trade, to these kinds of iconic phrases, but drawing out another meaning from them. Of course, as a rapper, all he has is really his words, and he's also a kind of womanizer who can't keep his pants up. So, like, it's he's gonna follow his word and balls to the end as well. Um, it's yeah, we have so much more to talk. Next time, maybe we'll continue with Scarface, maybe having watched the earlier movie as well, this, and we can enlarge our discussion and talk more about the cultural significances. We can talk about other movies, but we'll be back
By the
at the
way,
movies.
before you
At-
close,
yes.
sorry, when I stream, when you see me on stream, you see, some bed and curtains, but
Yeah.
what you don't see is this.
Nice. All right.
Now, he was Tony Montana. The world would remember him by another name, Scarface. He loved the American dream with a vengeance. That's a very nice, it's like little poster, I guess you could say, which I received
Nice.
when I was 16 or 17 years old, because it was my favorite movie back then, and
Wow.
it still is. Still is. Yeah. So don't
All
do
right.
drugs. Yeah.
Yes, don't do drugs, kids. Don't sell them either. That's illegal.
Don't
We'll
get
be
high on your
back. Rule number 2.
yeah.
Don't underestimate the other man's greed. And I am a greedy man. So we'll be back with further discussions on cinema and on TV series as well, perhaps, and more with this on this channel or on his. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you so much. I will drop the link now to the late show. You'll certainly see me there because I'll have to host it. And this might make an appearance too if he is so generous with his time.
That's right. Yeah. So go do something, but let's try.
Okay, I'll send that link now. We are late a little bit, but all right. See you on the other side, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.